What happens when America's favorite daytime host comes face to face with one of Hollywood's most uncompromising legends, and neither one is willing to bend? Well, that exact question exploded into reality on The Kelly Clarkson Show, delivering what many are already calling one of the most jaw-dropping moments in daytime TV history. What began as a lighthearted chat about classic films slowly unraveled into a tense, unforgettable confrontation that left the audience frozen in their seats. And trust me, what Kelly said next shocked everyone. But before we dive into the moment that changed the tone of the entire room, ask yourself this. Can generations of Hollywood ever truly see eye to eye? The atmosphere inside the studio was buzzing from the start. As Clint Eastwood stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted in applause, honoring a man whose legacy spans decades of cinema. Kelly welcomed him with her trademark warmth, that familiar, disarming smile that makes viewers feel like they're sitting across from a friend rather than watching a talk show. At first, everything flowed effortlessly. Kelly praised Clint's latest work, asking him to reflect on his long and storied journey through Hollywood. Clint, ever composed and reserved, responded with brief, measured answers, nodding politely as Kelly used her natural charm to keep the conversation moving. Then came the shift. Kelly leaned forward slightly, that unmistakable glint in her eye, the one that signals she's about to go deeper. She brought up a topic that had been dominating social media: how much the entertainment industry has evolved. She spoke about progress, about voices that were once ignored, now finally being heard, about representation and why it matters more today than ever before. That's when something changed. Clint's face stayed calm, but his posture subtly tightened. The audience sensed it too. The air grew heavier. Kelly continued, emphasizing the importance of listening to different perspectives and allowing storytelling to evolve with the times. Then Clint cleared his throat. When he spoke, his gravelly voice carried decades of authority, the kind that once silenced entire rooms on movie sets. He reminded everyone that he's been making films longer than most people in the studio have been alive. Trends, he said, come and go, just like the weather. And suddenly, everyone leaned in. He made it clear. He doesn't create films to follow online trends or check boxes. He tells the stories that matter to him. Period. Kelly's smile never faded, but her eyes sharpened. She calmly replied that artistic vision is important, yes. But so is responsibility, especially when your platform reaches millions. Films, she said, shape culture. What appears on screen influences how people see the world, whether creators intended or not. Clint didn't hesitate. He fired back that he's not in the business of telling people how to think. He's there to tell stories, real stories, not carefully crafted fantasies designed to make everyone comfortable. At that moment, the temperature in the studio noticeably rose. Kelly's tone remained friendly, but there was resolve beneath it now. She brought up examples from film history about movies that didn't age well, portrayals that caused harm, stereotypes that persisted simply because no one questioned them at the time. She wasn't attacking him. She was challenging the idea. Doing what seasoned journalists do. Asking the uncomfortable questions that spark real conversations. Clint listened silently, jaw set in that unmistakable Eastwood way. When she finished, he paused, then asked a question that stopped everything cold. "Are you done?" Kelly blinked, clearly caught off guard by the bluntness. She explained she was only trying to discuss how the industry could grow and do better. That's when Clint leaned back and delivered a line that echoed through the studio. "That's the problem," he said. "Everyone thinks they know how to do better. Everyone has an opinion about what should and shouldn't be made." Then he added something that felt like a message from another era of Hollywood. "When I was coming up, you made your film, you stood by it, and you let the audience decide." And in that moment, one question lingered in the air. Unanswered, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. Has Hollywood changed for the better? Or has it simply forgotten where it came from? You didn't have 1,000 voices tearing you apart before the credits even finished rolling. That line landed hard. Kelly took a slow breath, the kind you take when you're recalibrating in real time. You could almost see the gears turning. Calmly, she replied that times have changed, and maybe that isn't such a bad thing. Maybe accountability, she suggested, actually matters. Clint didn't miss a beat. The moment she rose from her chair, the entire studio seemed to stop breathing. She straightened, steady and unflinching, and said that plenty of people come on this show precisely because they know they'll be treated with respect, but they also know she won't toss out soft questions just to keep guests comfortable. Then she delivered the line that drew a sharp gasp from the crowd. "If you can't handle being asked to reflect on your impact," she said, "then maybe you shouldn't be doing press." Clint stayed seated, staring up at her with that unmistakable Eastwood intensity. "Maybe," he replied coolly, "you shouldn't be doing interviews if you can't handle different opinions." Kelly let out a short, sharp laugh. She said she can handle different opinions just fine. What she can't handle, she added, is arrogance masquerading as principle. "There's a difference," she said, "between standing by your work and refusing to engage with valid criticism." That's when Clint stood up, slowly, deliberately, matching her energy beat for beat. He said he's been dealing with criticism his entire life, like from critics who actually understand film, not from talk show hosts who think they're journalists just because they ask leading questions. The insult hung in the air like smoke. And Kelly changed. Her voice dropped. Lower, calmer, more serious than anyone watching had ever heard it on this show. She said she's interviewed presidents. She's interviewed icons. She's interviewed people who've shaped the world. And not one of them has ever shown her this level of disrespect. She reminded him she's a 3-time Grammy winner, that she built her career on talent and relentless hard work, and she will not be spoken to like she's insignificant by someone too stubborn to admit the world has changed around him. Clint's face hardened even further. He said the world hasn't passed him by. He just refuses to kneel to a culture that values outrage over substance. Kelly shot back instantly. She said she values substance deeply, which is exactly why she's disappointed that one of cinema's most celebrated legends would rather be defensive than reflective. She admitted she had immense respect for him, past tense, but this conversation showed her who he really is. Clint shrugged it off. He said he doesn't need her respect. He has a lifetime of work that speaks for itself. Kelly didn't hesitate. "Work doesn't exist in a vacuum," she said. "It exists in context, and context matters." Clint snapped back that context is just an excuse people use to rewrite history to fit their own narrative. Kelly replied that history is made of facts, not narratives. And the fact is, some of his films have hurt people, whether he's willing to acknowledge it or not. Clint said he's not responsible for how people choose to interpret art. Kelly's response cut straight through the room. "When the interpretation is consistent across entire communities," she said, "maybe it's not interpretation. Maybe it's impact." Now the argument was at a full boil. Both of them stood facing each other across the small coffee table. A table that suddenly felt like a canyon. Off camera, Kelly's producer was waving frantically, signaling for a commercial break. Kelly ignored it. She told Clint she invited him onto the show in good faith, believing they could have a meaningful exchange but instead he turned it into a masterclass in ego. Clint replied that he came in good faith and walked straight into a setup. Kelly's hands trembled slightly as she clenched them at her sides. And in that moment, everyone watching knew. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a collision. She made it clear. None of this was a setup. Every question she asked, she said, was fair territory for someone with his profile, his influence, and his history. Clint immediately challenged that. "Fair according to who?" he asked. "According to her rulebook Her generation's rulebook? Kelly shook her head. She said this wasn't about generations at all. It was about basic human decency, about recognizing when your work, even unintentionally, might have contributed to harm. Clint pushed back hard. He said his films have brought joy to millions. They've told stories that needed telling. They've pushed boundaries when boundaries needed to be pushed. Kelly didn't deny any of that. But then she delivered a line that cut straight through the noise. Contributions and consequences can coexist, she said. Clint exhaled sharply. He said he was tired of this conversation. Tired of being told he needs to apologize for the films he believed in. Kelly responded instantly. Nobody was asking for an apology. They were asking him to listen, to understand, to show a little humility. Clint said humility means accepting your limitations, and his limitation, he explained, is that he refuses to pretend he cares about the opinions of people who weren't there, who didn't live through what he lived through, who want to judge the past by today's standards. Kelly didn't hesitate. Standards evolve, she said, because people learn and people grow, and if you're unwilling to grow, that says everything. Clint said he's grown plenty, just not in the direction she wants him to. Kelly asked quietly, what direction is that? The direction of empathy, she answered herself, of awareness. Clint scoffed. The direction of groupthink, he said, of submission. Now the words were sharper. The space between them felt charged, almost electric. Kelly finally said what many were thinking. This is pointless, she said. You're determined to miss the point. Clint shot back that the only thing he missed was why he agreed to come on the show in the first place. Kelly took a step back. For a split second, it looked like she might retreat, like the moment had finally broken her resolve. But then she did something no one saw coming. She turned away from Clint and faced the camera directly, breaking the fourth wall entirely. She said she needed to speak to everyone watching at home, and everyone sitting in the audience, because what was happening right now was bigger than a disagreement between two people. This moment, she said, is something we see over and over in our culture, when someone with power and legacy refuses to engage with growth, refuses to acknowledge that their actions can have consequences beyond their intentions. Clint interrupted her, telling her not to use the audience as a shield, to have the courage to finish the argument they were having. Kelly snapped back around to face him. She said she has plenty of courage. That's why she's doing this openly, on camera, in front of everyone, instead of smiling politely and pretending everything is fine. She said that's what people in his generation do. Smile for the cameras, then say what they really think behind closed doors. But she's not going to do that. She said she's going to be honest about how disappointed she is, how frustrated she is, and how exhausted she is. Clint replied that if she's exhausted, she should imagine how he feels, being lectured by everyone under 50 who thinks they invented morality. Kelly said this isn't about inventing anything. It's about evolving, about recognizing that just because something was acceptable once doesn't mean it should be acceptable forever. Clint shook his head. Some things are timeless, he said. Some truths don't change just because fashion changes. Kelly asked him to name one truth that justifies refusing to listen when people say they've been hurt. Clint answered without hesitation. The truth that art is supposed to challenge, he said. To provoke, to disturb, not to comfort. Kelly responded just as quickly. Art can challenge without dehumanizing, she said. It can provoke without traumatizing. It can disturb without damaging. Clint told her she's living in a fantasy world if she believes every piece of art can be engineered to cause zero harm. Kelly clarified, she's not asking for zero harm. She's asking for accountability when harm happens. For acknowledgement. For a willingness to do better. Clint crossed his arms and said he acknowledges his films. Every single one of them. And in that moment, the question hanging over the studio wasn't just about art anymore. It was about whether acknowledgement without reflection is really enough. For better or worse, Clint said, those films are his, and he stands by every single one. Kelly didn't hesitate. Standing by your work and refusing to examine it, she said, are two very different things. The studio went completely silent. No shifting, no murmurs, just stunned attention. A few audience members quietly lifted their phones, recording what they already knew was becoming a moment no one would forget. Kelly noticed. She glanced at them and said, "Go ahead, record this. Post it everywhere." Then she paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Because maybe it's time people see that not every conversation wraps up neatly. Not every disagreement ends with a hug and a laugh. She continued, voice steady but raw. Sometimes you realize you're talking to someone who fundamentally doesn't want to understand. And then you have to decide, Marhog, do you keep slamming your head against that wall? Or do you walk away? Clint responded coolly. If she wanted to walk away, he said, no one was stopping her. Kelly's eyes widened. This is my show, she said. My set, my house. If anyone's walking away, it's you. Clint nodded slowly. Fine, he said. He'd leave. He had better things to do than be a prop in what he called her crusade. Kelly scoffed. A crusade? She repeated. As if basic human empathy is a crusade. As if asking someone to care about their impact is some radical agenda. Clint turned toward the exit, but Kelly wasn't finished. Before he goes, she said, she wanted him to know something. As painful as this conversation has been, it clarified something for her. She's realized she can't keep doing this. Can't keep hosting surface-level conversations where everyone plays nice and nothing real ever gets addressed. Her show, she said, was meant to be about connection, about joy, about bringing people together. But what's the point, she asked, if I can't have honest moments like this without it turning into a battle? She admitted she's tired. Tired of the performance. Tired of pretending difficult conversations aren't necessary. Clint stopped mid-step and turned back. If you're tired, he said bluntly, then quit. But don't blame me for your exhaustion. Kelly shook her head. I'm not blaming you, she said. I'm thanking you. The audience murmured, confused, sensing something big was coming. Kelly's producer was now visible on camera, standing, looking panicked. Kelly ignored everything around her and spoke directly to Clint. She said she came into this believing they could bridge a gap, that if they just talked it through, they'd find common ground. But there is no common ground with someone who refuses to meet you halfway. Clint said he's met plenty of people halfway in his life, just not people who demand he apologize for his existence. Kelly replied quietly, nobody demanded that. But the fact that you see it that way tells me everything I need to know. Then she turned to the camera. Her voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through the anger. She said she loves this show, loves her audience, loves the opportunity she's been given. But she can't keep doing it like this. She can't keep smiling through conversations that matter. Can't keep sanding down the edges to make everything palatable and safe, when the world outside isn't palatable or safe at all. Then she said the words no one expected. Effective immediately, production is shutting down. The audience gasped, a collective sound of shock and disbelief rippling through the studio. Clint's expression barely changed, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even respect. Kelly clarified she's not canceling the show forever, but she needs time. Time to figure out what it should be, how to make it a space where real dialogue can happen without collapsing into what just happened here. She said she refuses to be part of the problem, refuses to give platforms to people who won't engage sincerely, refuses to pretend politeness matters more than truth. Finally, Clint spoke again, his voice quieter now. He said she's making a mistake, burning down everything she's built, over one argument. Kelly shook her head. This isn't one argument, she said. It's 1,000 small compromises that led to this moment, and I'm choosing not to compromise anymore. The room stayed frozen as she explained that her team would handle the logistics, the schedules, the fallout. But right here, right now, she was done. Clint dismissed it, saying she was being dramatic, that she'd regret this once she cooled off. Kelly laughed, a real laugh this time. She said she's never been calmer, never been more certain. Then she looked at him and said plainly that he could see himself out. But she wasn't finished. Kelly turned to her crew, her staff, the people who make the show happen every single day. She apologized to them, her voice softening. She said none of this was their fault. They'd been nothing but professional, supportive, and loyal. But she needed to do this, not for herself, for her integrity. They'd figure it out together, she promised. She just couldn't keep pretending nothing happened. The crew stayed silent. Some nodded. Some looked worried. All of them stood with her. Clint walked off the stage without another word. Kelly watched him go, and when he disappeared through the exit, she turned back to the audience. She said she knows this isn't what anyone expected or wanted him to witness, but sometimes the most important moments are the most uncomfortable ones. She said she hopes they understand, hopes they'll support her decision, but if they don't, she understands that too. She's going to take time, she said. Time to reassess, time to reflect, time to decide what kind of show she wants to make when she comes back. Because she will come back, just differently. At first, the applause was hesitant, scattered. Then it grew, louder, stronger. People stood. Some were crying, moved by the raw honesty of the moment. Kelly's eyes filled with tears, and she smiled through them. That same genuine Kelly smile viewers have known for years. She thanked them, thanked everyone. And then she walked off her own stage. The cameras lingered on the empty chairs, silent, unmoving, for a long, heavy moment before finally cutting to black. And now the question is yours. If you made it this far, hit that subscribe button, because this moment sparked a conversation that's still echoing across the internet. Drop a comment below and tell us what you think. Did Kelly make the right call by shutting everything down? Or should she have handled it differently? Let's talk.